Hello everyone. Today we're going to be discussing living in Flint, an AR experience about the Flint water crisis. This experience will cover the life of Flint residents during the water crisis, which began in 2014 yet remains relevant to this day. Let's begin with the basics of how our experience will work before we dive in.
To begin with, this experience will take place within a smaller, two-story house in Flint, Michigan during the water crisis. The house is lived in with evidence of the water crisis scattered around in the form of water bottles, stained sinks and tubs, and a water filter on the kitchen sink.
Let's discuss the mechanics and narration style. The player will move through teleportation, and when players teleport to specific areas, they will automatically be positioned to more easily perform tasks. For interactions, the experience is free roam, so certain events will trigger as the player moves through the house and completes tasks. The game guides you through a story, so you won't be able to complete the tasks out of order, despite being able to travel anywhere in the house. Tasks are mostly fetch quests, retrieving special items around the house and bringing them to a specific area. Others involve just traveling to a specific room.
Before we finally enter into the game, the background is going to appear completely black. Text is going to fade in and out, giving context and relevant information. The beginning section will be very short, because it's supposed to provide a precursor to the rest of the experience. When the alarm clock goes off, the players will open their eyes and get out of bed. To provide some background information, this story surrounds Mario and Helene Wilson, a couple with two children, Mario Jr. and Margaret. They are a low-income family that has been heavily affected by the economic decline in Flint. Maria works for a local manufacturing firm, and Helene is a stay-at-home mom. The family was eager that the government was taking stride toward improving Flint's economy. However, they did have concerns when rumors began to spread that the water was making people. Their worst fears were realized when official reports were released about the elevated amount of lead in the water and the health impacts it could have on their children. The Wilsons now rely on daily water bottle distribution for their clean water supply.
Moving into Task 1, the interactions that the player will face will be as followed. The player wakes up and automatically gets out of bed. A prompt in the corner of the screen shows how to move around the house/teleport. Once the player successfully teleports, a prompt will show on the screen explaining how to collect objects, specifically an almost empty glass of water on the side table. When the player successfully collects the cup of water, the door will open and trigger the next prompt. The content that this is trying to demonstrate is understanding the basic motion controls to progress in the game. The image below represents an example of the room they could be in and the perspective that they will see. This interaction demonstrates the specific mechanisms that will mostly be used throughout your experience. Simple techniques that are shown in this video will be used throughout.
Moving forward to Task 2, the interactions are as follows. First, the Make Breakfast prompt shows up in this corner of the screen. Then, the task is a fetch quest, and a list of the items that the player has to gather will appear below the prompt, such as eggs, salt, toast, and water. When the sink is triggered for the water that comes out will be brown, and the prompt will replace it with orange juice. This triggers a fact pop-up on the screen. Once all the items are collected, the player has to select the stove to cook the food. This ends the task and triggers the next one. Now, the content behind this will appear on the screen once the player triggers the sink. The content is that the Flint General Motors plant back in 1966 dumped millions of gallons of waste into the Flint River per day. The toxicity of this water eroded the pipes when the government switched the water source to the river. Julia Shen, who basically said this quote, is a resident from Flint that shared her experience on the situation. She, too, faced difficulties doing daily tasks just like this one, making breakfast.
Moving forward to Task 3. checking on the kids. Here we have 5 interactions. The first interaction, check on kids' prom, shows up in the corner of the screen. The next interaction is that the player can see a sick kid on bed and TV nearest to the bed. The task is a fetch quest, and a list of items the player has to gather will appear below the prompt: thermometer, and note from doctor with diagnosis. By using these 2 items, the player can see the temperature and diagnosis. Also, TV shows news that talks about long-term side effects from a lead surplus in water. When the player comes closer to the kid starts to cough and pop up information about the condition of the child on top in the form text. The fact that appears on screen when the player checks on the kid and starts the fetch quest says that children during the crisis started to develop rashes and strange disease due to low water quality. Nakia Wakes, yet another individual that lived in Flint during this time, said that they can't tell us what's going to happen long term to these children. Her description of how the children felt shows how much this crisis impacted everyone.
After completing Task 3, Task 4, Set the Table, is next. The task is fairly simple, the player needing to select dishes from the counter before selecting the table, these actions automatically creating place settings. The player would then need to retrieve the food on the stove and select the plates, filling them with food. This completes the task. The 2 images above are examples of what the in-game kitchen and dining table would look like. Despite the simplicity, the purpose of this activity is to dive deeper and to see how people had to complete regular tasks in the midst of a crisis.
After completing Task 4, next is Task 5, Finding Water. The previous task mentioned that one of the kids said the water is out. Hence, the interactions include a Find Water prompt showing in the corner of the screen. The player then selects to go through 2 different doors to look for leftover water bottles. Player then selects Call Neighbor in the corner of the screen, which proceeds to ring into a phone call with the neighbors. Neighbors claim they are low on water too and cannot help you at this time. The task is completed when the player hangs up the call. The concept behind this interaction is that minorities were at a disadvantage during the crisis due to systematic racism and distrust in the government.
Finally, Task 6 is getting money for the store. The interactions are as follows. First, the Get Money for Store prompt shows up in the corner of the screen. Then the player approaches the husband, Mario, and asks for money. Player then selects the wallet to notice that Mario only has $10 in his wallet. Player selects to use that $10. The player will then navigate outside and enters the car. When they enter the grocery store, they notice that there is a shortage of water bottles and that there is only 1 pack left. After selecting the water pack and returning home, the player will put the water along with the others, which are empty water bottles. The content behind this is going to appear when the player finds a drawer, and it's basically that most families were affected by the crisis, were a part of the lower income, and they were unable to move due to the lack of funds. And as said by Erwin Redlener, the mobility to make a decision to move or to do something different or interesting is a privilege of people with enough resources and money to do so. The purpose behind this task was basically to demonstrate the difficulty of even attaining money for water when you come from a poor background, and this was well explained by the primary source that was included.
The interactive experience has now ended. The overall purpose behind this interaction is to demonstrate the difficulties that poor Flint residents faced with regular tasks. Their lack of access to clean water incredibly impacted their health and wealth. The personal accounts from Julia Shen, Nakia Wakes, and Erwin Redlener helped us understand in detail how it felt to be a resident among the chaos. Currently, Flint has continually been trying to improve their water conditions. Their plan was to simply change the water supply as well as the pipes. However, this plan has been taking years to implement. Beyond the issue of water supply, the residents of Flint truly do not trust their government anymore. Even with clean water flowing, they choose to drink out of water bottles in order to avoid any hidden elements. This issue has not only impacted personal lives of people in Flint, but also the structure and importance of government in the city.
Thank you for taking a part of our interactive experience. We hope you were able to attain a first-hand experience of how it feels to be a citizen in Flint, Michigan.